Oh, hello, can you hear me at the back? Can you hear me at the front? Is that working okay? Okay, then let us begin. My name, for those of you that don't know me, is Julia Needham-Watts. I'm a councillor and Joint Deputy Leader of Richmond Council. And it's my privilege to welcome you to this, the 5th edition of the Richmond Sustainability Forum. It's great to see so many of you here and to see this initiative continue to grow in scale and in collective ambition. And it's a delight to be here in this lovely venue. Thank you to Matt Bailey and the Duke Street Church team for hosting us in this attractive and inclusive space in the heart of Richmond. A very special welcome to newcomers to the forum, whether you're residents, representatives of community groups, businesses or partners of the council. And of course, welcome also to those of you who've become familiar faces, and all of you who are here to learn, connect, share ideas and commit to positive action. At this forum, we're officially launching Richmond upon Thames Climate and Nature Strategy 2025 to 2030. And we're halfway through the decade and time isn't slowing down, well, not for me anyway. It's an important moment in time and it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate our growing momentum and our shared commitment to sustainability in our borough and beyond. I hope you've enjoyed interacting with the marketplace stalls and finding out about various local initiatives and practical ways to get involved. Please do sign up to find out more about anything that's caught your eye. Thank you to the officers who've been running the stalls from various teams in Richmond Council. Air quality, public health, community BlueScapes and parks and trees teams are all here. And our partners at Habitats and Heritage who are coordinating our work on the Biodiversity Action Plan, Greenmark and their Making Business Greener scheme, and Make My House Green, who are working with the council on solar energy and home sustainability. Now, I'm the warm-up act here, so you'll shortly be hearing from Rachel Purdon, who's the Head of Sustainability at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and Rachel will be explaining some of Kew's sustainability work and talking about the new carbon garden, which is taking shape. We'll then hear from Andrew Hagger, who's the Head of Climate Change and Sustainability at Richmond Council, and he'll give us a whistle-stop tour of our new strategy. You'll then be treated to a panel discussion chaired by John Evans, the Assistant Chief Executive of Richmond Council, with a lineup of local experts and me ready to share their thoughts relating to the strategy's 5 key themes. And those themes are, in a nutshell, buildings, transport and air quality, nature, resources and resilience. I'm very grateful to Marguerite Murdoch, who's a local architect, Tim Lennon from Richmond Cycling Campaign, Rachel from Kew, Simon Westgarth from the Richmond Furniture Scheme, and Myszka Gużkowska from Barnes Common and Community BlueScapes for joining us this evening. And I'll close by emphasising that our climate and nature strategy is a shared roadmap. Its success depends on everyone, and I hope you'll be inspired this evening to engage with the speakers and the stallholders, share your feedback, and take your ideas back into your communities, homes and workplaces. Without further ado, I'll hand over now to Rachel Purdon, who's going to inspire us with some insights into her work at Kew. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I'm Rachel Purdon, Head of Sustainability at Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. I've worked at Kew for just over 5 years, and my first year at Kew, other than getting to know the organisation and weathering the storm of COVID, was writing and launching our sustainability strategy, which is headlined Reaching Climate Positive by 2030, which is an ambitious goal. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's in that strategy, how we're working to deliver against those commitments, Kew's new carbon garden, and then finish by sharing some highlights and some lessons learned. So with apologies, I'm going to assume a medium level of knowledge about Kew's context and Kew's background, but we're an organisation whose mission is to understand and protect plants and fungi for the well-being of people and the future of all life on Earth. We're actually growing quite rapidly as an organisation. So when I joined in 2020, we had around 1,000 staff, just under 1,000 staff. And we're up at 1,500 staff at the moment, including over 700 scientists and hundreds of horticulturalists, and a sustainability team of 7, including myself. which is great progress. It was just me for a few years. Kew's worked for hundreds of years to understand plants and fungi, but this decade that work is more important than ever as extinction rates soar and the importance of protecting and working with natural ecosystems has never been more apparent. Kew has 2 UK sites and actually a third site in Madagascar, but we work in over 110 countries. We're an international organisation and we're a partnership-led organisation. We have partnerships all over the world. Across our UK sites, we have over 300 buildings, but the big energy and carbon users are those big public-facing glass houses that you'll be familiar with, including the Palm House. We also have a lot of glass house area behind the scenes where we propagate and grow. Unfortunately, those use energy too. So our energy bills have risen year on year since I've started. I promise it's not my fault. When I started, the energy bills were just over £1 million a year, and now we're over £4 million a year. So that's a significant impact on a charitable and government-funded organisation. And just to give you a sense of scale, just setting the scene in terms of Kew's impact and footprint, we use roughly the same amount of energy, water, and waste as between 1,000 and 2,000 UK households. So it's not huge. Our footprint isn't huge in terms of kind of carbon emissions, energy, water, waste, but it's significant and obviously something that we're really working to understand and minimise through our delivery of our sustainability strategy. And this is a quote from Richard, actually, when Richard Deverell, the director of RBG Kew, when we launched the Manifesto for Change and the Sustainability Strategy in 2021. Kew's vision for Kew is that fundamentally we align everything we're doing to addressing these twin global challenges of the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. And Kew has a meaningful contribution to make across both challenges. And just to explain, you'll see these stripes on my slides. I use these to visualize these two twin crises and the fact that we're already seeing and experiencing the change associated with both. We've already experienced more than 1.2 degrees of warming. The last, as it says, 2023 and 2024 were particularly warm, and it turns out 2025 has also been particularly warm. And we're also already seeing global declines in biodiversity as represented by the biodiversity stripes. So, as I mentioned, Kew launched 3 strategies in 2021, the Manifesto being our headline organisational strategy, the Manifesto for Change, the Sustainability Strategy on the left, which is primarily focused on carbon decarbonisation, but also tackles broader sustainability challenges as well. But just to explain why nature or biodiversity isn't kind of a headline on that sustainability strategy, that's because that's captured through our entire organisation's work. So I'm fairly lucky as a head of sustainability in that biodiversity is covered by the scientists, the horticulturalists, and our organisational mission. And so the gap that the sustainability strategy was filling for Kew was focused more on those decarbonisation, energy efficiency, water reduction type actions. The science strategy was also updated, and across these 3 strategies, this set out Kew's important mission this decade in tackling both of these twin crises. Within the sustainability strategy itself, we set out 3 pathways. So action at the top is where you find the typical sustainability strategy type stuff for any organisation, trying to use more renewables, trying to produce less waste and recycle more, trying to use less water or rainwater storage, etc., trying to travel by sustainable means. So action is really important, and it's crucial for our strategy that we walk the talk and we deliver our organisational activities in the most sustainable way possible. But expertise recognises that our horticulturalists, our scientists have huge contributions to make in demonstrating and evidencing best practice, especially when it comes to nature-based solutions and the power of collaboration with nature and natural ecosystems. And voice recognises that ultimately our carbon footprint as an organisation is fairly small, but our reach, our power of leadership, the power to catalyse change outside our walls, we can actually have a much bigger impact by talking about this work, talking about this transition, and by encouraging others to change along with us. So those 3 pathways set out our sustainability delivery. And then I'm not going to summarise all the commitments within our strategy because there were over 50 of them, but just to very briefly pull out a few of the top commitments One is to work towards reaching climate positive by 2030, which I'll explain on the next slide. The next is to develop detailed carbon reduction pathways and carbon offsetting policies. We're working on both of those. We have been for several years. We're still working on both of those as we speak. Establishing site-wide strategies for energy, water and waste. And we have done that. So we have a site-wide energy strategy. We have a waste action plan, a really detailed waste action plan. I've got some photos for anyone who loves bins. And we've also got a water and irrigation strategy, which is being developed, focusing on the importance of capturing and reusing rainwater. And then a really important aspect is working with our suppliers and our supply chains to understand and influence the impact, negative and positive impacts through our supply chains. Next, just to briefly explain what we mean at Kew by climate positive. Sorry to have a diagram, but I feel like it's important that we're on the same page about what we actually mean. So the most important element of reaching climate positive is reducing our organisational emissions as fast as we can. Below the dotted line up the top, which is essentially our science-based carbon budget, so that's the allocated allowable emissions according to an international methodology aligned with a 1.5-degree limit, aligned with the Paris Accord. And then the other important element of reaching climate positive is offsetting more than our remaining emissions by 2030. And as I mentioned, we're working on that offsetting policy at the moment. It's something we know is really important to get right. It's an area that faces a lot of scrutiny. People have concerns, and those concerns are valid. There's a lot to get right, but when you do get carbon offsetting right, it can be a really positive and important contribution to tackling the climate emergency. And so that's a necessary part of reaching that goal of climate positive by 2030. I'm not wanting to overwhelm you with graphs, but just very briefly, this is a figure that's in our sustainability strategy, which identifies different sources of emissions from Kew. And just to identify really that on the left-hand side, in the core carbon footprint, those are the things that are more measurable. For most categories on the left, in the core footprint, we have a greater degree of either control or influence over those emissions. Whereas when you work to the right-hand side, those are areas where we have either less ability to accurately measure or less ability to control or influence those categories of emissions. But those are really important things for us to measure, to monitor, to know about, to communicate, and try and influence as best as we can. We actually have pretty detailed reporting on these now, the core carbon footprint. So we report quarterly. So hot off the press, I can tell you that Kew's emissions this year are about 10% lower than Q1 last year, which is very good news. And then this is taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. This is just one of a series of works in progress that we're developing to predict how we're doing on our journey to decarbonise by 2030 and beyond. So on the very left-hand side is our baseline emissions that we measured in 2019. And then as you progress from left to right, these are representing a series of interventions or changes that we believe will reduce our footprint between baseline 2019 and 2030. So this first one is really important to value and celebrate. And that recognises that the UK electricity grid continues to get greener each year. And as the carbon intensity of the grid falls, that reduces our organisational footprint from the use of electricity, which is really positive. The next 4 chunks represent energy efficiency and decarbonisation projects, i.e. taking out gas and oil boilers and replacing them with air source heat pumps. The biggest one, or the singular most visible, most showcased project will be the Palm House, which we don't have a confirmed timeline for because it's fundraising dependent, but fingers crossed, should the fundraising plan proceed rapidly, we will be hoping to be working on that project before 2030 and delivering those carbon savings in line with these predictions. And then there's a series of other smaller predictions, and then that leaves our kind of estimated 2030 emissions. As the massive caveat says, things keep changing, so this is an ever-evolving picture, but we're working really hard to keep track and monitor that prediction to understand how we're doing. And then I get to celebrate. So between when I started and today, Kew has increased its solar generation by over 500%. So these are some of the photos of solar panels at Kew and Wakehurst. Most of them aren't super visible, so you probably don't see them when you visit. The most visible ones are actually the Millennium Seed Bank at Wakehurst. So for anyone who does make it down to Wakehurst, you'll see plentiful solar panels, easy to spot. But most of the ones at Kew, for semi-obvious reasons, are actually back-of-house buildings, so they're not that easy for the visitor to see. But to show this on a graph, this is one of my favorite graphs of the month. This shows how much we've generated this spring. Obviously, it's been delightfully sunny, and you can see that we've way out-generated compared to our predictions, because we predicted a normal level of sunshine rather than every day being sunny. But really good progress. And then just to celebrate wider, Kew cannot take any credit for this. This is the series of projects and interventions and policies from governments and organisations far beyond our walls. But I think it's really important to recognise and celebrate the massive progress that the UK electricity grid is making. It's the greenest it's ever been to use electricity in the UK, and that really supports and enables these decarbonisation projects to have such a massive and positive impact. And then just briefly to summarise some of our decarb projects. So we've actually delivered these top two. So these two buildings, the Jodrell at Kew and the Wakehurst Mansion and Stable Block, are both now heated by air source heat pumps rather than gas or oil boilers. And then there's three down the bottom which were work in progress. The Temperate House we are working on at the moment. The Lower Nursery we'll be working on next year. And then Net Zero Palm House, as I said, is a super exciting showcase, world-leading, amazing decarbonisation project. Just need to fundraise a few more £1 million, but we are working on that very hard, and I can't wait to see that project get going. There's been a huge amount of planning and technical design behind the scenes. This is the first time in history that it would be possible to heat the Palm House with low-carbon electric heat, and so the fact that we're working to implement that initiative as soon as we can is really very exciting. And then to talk about the Carbon Gardens, I'm really pleased to be able to share a little bit about this new development, which is opening very shortly, open by the end of July. It's opening on the 25th of July, if you want to plan your visit. So this will be a beautiful, informative space where we explore one of the most vital systems supporting life on Earth, and that is the carbon cycle. It's an opportunity for Kew to engage visitors with the importance of carbon, which underpins all life on Earth, and explain how it flows between plants, soils, the atmosphere, and fossil fuels, and that the vital reliance and relationship between different elements of that carbon cycle. It will be designed with hope and optimism to share positive information and messaging about solutions, and share the message that plants and fungi are our allies in seeking to repair our climate. So visitors will be welcomed into this garden by diverse, colourful planting that draws them into the story of carbon. And then at the centre will be the pavilion, which is inspired by the form of a fruiting body. I get told off if I call it a mushroom, a fruiting body, offering shelter, a space to pause, and a visual landmark. This garden will feature 35 new trees and 400 square metres of wildflower meadow, and will help to lock carbon into that landscape as well as supporting biodiversity. One highlight within the space will be the dry garden, so we'll be exploring how we can adapt planting in the UK to a changing climate and showcase drought-tolerant and Mediterranean species. I've got a list of some Mediterranean species, but I'm just going to say lavender because that one's nice and easy. If anyone wants to come and ask me about other species in the dry garden, then please feel free. And we'll also be planting resilient tree species in line with Kew's recently launched landscape succession plan. So Kew scientists and horticulturists did a huge amount of research to identify which trees at Kew were most under threat and which would be most resilient to future temperatures. And there were some scary headlines in there. A large proportion of the trees currently on site are not likely to be able to survive the conditions of 2090. And tree planting is a long-term game, so anything planted now needs to be suitable for future conditions. So the landscape succession plan has identified a series of species that are being prioritised for any new on-site planting, and those will be showcased in the carbon garden as well. And importantly, we're committed to delivering the carbon garden in the most sustainable way possible. That means selecting low carbon and natural materials as far as is possible. So the pavilion itself is built from timber and a natural bio-based resin for the canopy. And the project manager, and she really has done an absolutely amazing job at reusing materials. So a vast amount of the retaining wall, paving and foundations have actually used materials that were already on site at Kew. We're also going to be doing a detailed carbon footprint calculation, so we will know the carbon footprint of the carbon garden, and we'll be ensuring that the tree planting mitigates any emissions from the construction such that the whole garden will be net zero. And as well as using this space to talk about the importance of carbon in natural cycles and what Kew is doing within its sustainability strategy to take action, we'll be encouraging visitors to take action themselves, including encouraging them to mulch and compost, to limit soil disturbance, for example, using no-dig gardening methods, and importantly, to always choose peat-free compost and peat-free planting when buying plants. And then just to draw back out, I hope you can see in this image that the bed along the bottom is actually being planted to reflect the climate stripes. I'm not certain how easy it will be to spot that from ground level, but I encourage you all to give it a go. I'll be standing there and squinting myself, but I'm sure it's going to look absolutely beautiful, and they're nearly there, so opening in just a few weeks. And then just to briefly draw out from that, Kew scientists are doing huge amounts of work, both at Kew and Wakehurst, particularly through a program called Nature Unlocked, which is measuring carbon storage and how carbon storage correlates with biodiversity. And they're measuring down to the millimetre scale above and below ground carbon storage in a whole array of different habitats, including semi-natural woodlands, species-rich grasslands, shrub, hedgerows, wetland mosaics, etc. And they've already found some really interesting key findings, including that when you're looking at woodland habitats, it's the single biggest trees that by far have an outsized impact on carbon storage. So when protecting woodland habitats, it's the most important priority in terms of carbon is those kind of biggest, oldest single trees that can have an outsized impact. But also soils, and you may know this already, soils often and usually store as much carbon as above ground. So trees often get a lot of the credit, but it's soils doing much of the heavy lifting. And that's certainly true on the Kew site. We believe across Kew Gardens, the soil stores in an order of magnitude more carbon than the above ground biomass. Although there's still some more detailed work going on, some of these are still estimates, and I'm really hoping, to be honest, they'll be publishing their figures soon, and then I can read the research paper and tell you all the answer. Okay, just wrapping up with a few highlights, some photos from things that have recognized progress over the last few years. So, for example, our new buildings have been built with timber. We've been building low carbon, both the Arboretum headquarters, the family kitchen and shop. Those are both completed in 2021, and we've got a new building on site, just work in progress at the moment, which is the Learning Centre, and that's going to be a passive house and whole life net zero, and timber framed, timber structured, and it's reusing the foundations. It's going to be such an amazing building to be proud of, so those really represent great progress. Then I've got some pictures representing electrification of horticultural equipment, of fleet, and of heating systems. And then on the right-hand side, that's an example of one of our menus from Kew where we've been showing carbon footprints on the menu and also ordering them. I don't know if you can quite see, but ordering them by carbon footprint. And it turns out that putting something at the top really does influence choices a lot more than I had guessed it would. So we've put the low-carbon plant-based options first, and that had a greater impact on ordering than we thought it would, so that was positive. And then just for any bin fans, we've been working really hard on growing our recycling rate and our waste action plan. We've introduced new visitor-facing bins. These ones up here have To stream, so introducing recycle out and about in the gardens, and then by gates, we're introducing 4 stream, so we can also recycle food and glass by the gates. And then over on the right, I've got the cup scheme, which took a lot of work, but we're really, really proud to now have returnable, reusable coffee cups in use at Kew, and we believe we've avoided, over the last couple of years, over 300,000, possibly over 400,000 single-use cups. Soon I'm hoping to be able to say 500,000, because I reckon we're nearly there. So that's a returnable cup scheme that is avoiding the use of previously vegware cups. And then we've also been working on the bottom row on various improvements for temporary events, things like Cue the Music or Easter trails, public programs, where we need temporary bins out and about to cope with increases in demand. So we've been introducing these bin toppers for temporary use, and also returnable cups for events. And this on the right-hand side is an example from Cue the Music, which is just wrapped up for this year, or actually just wrapped up forever. There's not going to be Cue the Music next year, but I'm not sure what it will be replaced with yet, so keep your eyes peeled. But Cue the Music sorts all of its waste behind the scenes, and it produces absolutely beautiful recycling, so that's something we can be really proud of. Okay, I think I might have gone slightly over time, in which case apologies. That's all from me for now, but I'll be around later, so feel free to come over and ask a question if you'd like to.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Yeah, fantastic to hear about all the work that Kew's doing to be much more sustainable. So my name is Andrew Hagger, and I'm Head of Climate Change and Sustainability. And as Councillor Needham-Watt said, I am going to do a whistle-stop tour of the climate strategy. It is published, it's available on the website, so if you do want to have a look at it, it's there. I think it's been designed really nicely, so hopefully it's an easy read. It's fairly long, but it is hopefully nice and understandable. So I'm just going to talk a bit about it, and if you follow that QR code, you'll be able to get to it. So just quickly, the Richmond upon Thames Climate and Nature Strategy sets out the borough's strategic approach to climate change over the next 5 years, and it weaves together lots of different strategies and action plans that touch on climate change and sustainability. So we've got the Air Quality Action Plan, the Retrofit Strategy, Adaptation and Resilience Strategy, Transport Strategy, Tree Strategy. It kind of brings it all together into one place and really takes that focus on climate change, sustainability and nature. And it's supported by a detailed action plan as well. So we've set out what we're going to do over the next 12 to 18 months, and we'll be reporting on that as we deliver against it. And importantly, it's a climate and nature strategy, so recognising the links between the climate crisis and nature loss, and that's something that Rachel touched on earlier as well, and the approach that Kew's been taking on this. So a bit about the climate challenge. So we know that climate change poses a threat to us in Richmond. So climate change is going to bring rising temperatures, flooding and disruption from extreme weather events, and also potential societal disruption as we see impacts around the globe that will then filter through to us as well. And we know the areas that we need to target to reduce our carbon emissions as well. We know where the emissions come from within the borough. We know that 46% comes from buildings and 24% comes from transport, and that's the vast majority of where our carbon emissions come from. And we also know that there are ecological threats as well, such as biodiversity loss, invasive species, and also habitat degradation. And so we need to take collective action on this. The council can't do this on its own. And what the strategy does is bring this all together and show that where the council can take action, but also where others can take action. And it's a bit of a call to everybody across the borough to come together to take action on climate change together. So there's 3 key strands to what we do as the council, and some of the targets around it as well. So one is around becoming a carbon neutral organisation by 2030. So that's about the council showing leadership and reducing its own carbon emissions. So our target is 2030, and that's about looking at our buildings and reducing the carbon emissions from our buildings, looking at our fleet and switching away from fossil fuel vehicles towards electrified vehicles, and also becoming a climate-ready organisation as well. So making sure that we've got the staffing, the knowledge, we've got the finances in place to be able to drive forward action on climate change and reduce those emissions. Second part is about creating an environment that is low carbon, sustainable, and also resilient as well, and that's really key. So it's about using our powers, our responsibilities as a local authority to make the environment better for everyone in Richmond. And it's about working with communities so they can take action on climate change as well. So working with all of you in the room here this evening, working with groups across the borough, working with partners as well, so that we can all take action together on climate change. And combined, those will take us towards our target of a net zero borough by 2043. And that target is a science-based target. It's based on our contribution to what we should be doing around being in line with the Paris Agreement of 2015 and keeping climate change to as close to 1.5 degrees C as possible and under 2 degrees. So that's our fair share and our fair contribution as a borough. So our vision is to become a beacon of sustainability, achieving net zero through the collective efforts of the council, communities, businesses, and also partners as well. And we're not starting from scratch here. We've had a climate emergency strategy previously from 2020 to 2025, and we've delivered some really significant actions. So we've achieved a CDP A rating for 3 years in a row, which is a really great achievement. It shows that we're being leaders in this field. We've reduced carbon emissions across the council, we've planted trees, we've done energy efficiency improvements to lots and lots of properties across the borough, and we've also installed EV charge points. And the aim of this strategy that we've just launched is to build on these successes. And there's 5 principles behind the new strategy. So one is about us being a place shaper. We help to shape Richmond as a borough. And also that we've got that focus on reducing carbon emissions because we know that we need to take action on that. And also that we're building a resilient borough. So we're making sure that we're building in the infrastructure that we need to protect communities from extreme heat and from increased flooding in the future. And that we're working with communities and partners, and also that we're joining our actions together so we can get the most from it, so that we can see the co-benefits that come from climate action. And so there's 5 key focus areas for our work across the borough. One is around our buildings. It's about reducing carbon emissions from our buildings across the borough, and that includes looking at domestic housing, so looking at sort of social rented, private sector rented, and also owner-occupied, and supporting those people in the borough to be able to do retrofit, to improve the energy efficiency of their homes, and also to switch away from gas-fired heating to electrified heating like heat pumps and things like that. It's about our travel and our air, so it's about increasing sustainable travel and also reducing air pollution. So how do we switch away from fossil-fueled vehicles to electric vehicles? How do we increase sustainable travel around the borough? How do we increase cargo bikes? And also how do we improve air quality within the borough as well? Because air quality and air pollution and climate change are really intrinsically linked, and tackling one tackles the other while giving really great health benefits for everybody who lives and works in Richmond. There's our nature, which is about making sure that we're protecting and enhancing biodiversity and green spaces. So that's about making sure that we're connecting different green areas across the borough and getting that connectivity right, making sure that we're promoting and protecting those existing green spaces as well, and making sure that we're putting in that resilience as well. And also involving communities in those green spaces, because we know that you all care about your green spaces and want to get involved to support that as well. Our resources is about looking at moving to a zero waste economy and a circular economy as well. So trying to move away from take, make and waste into a much circular approach that reuses materials throughout. And our resilience is about preparing for a changing climate. Supporting that, we've got accelerating actions. That's about actions that we're taking as the council. And I mentioned about decarbonising our buildings, our vehicles, also looking at our procurement, and also making sure we're ready for climate change as well in terms of the knowledge and skills that we've got as an organisation. And it's also about making sure that we as the council are working with you as communities. So making sure that we're communicating on climate change and getting the information out there, and also enabling and supporting community climate action, for example, through micro-grants. And just a little bit about how we've created this strategy. So we've engaged on it. So we launched an engagement phase in October, and we recruited community reporters who were a really important part of this work. And they went out and they spoke to their communities and their networks. Then we created a draft strategy off the back of that, which was published in February. Then we consulted on that draft strategy, and then we've published it more recently and took it through the committee process and to full council. So we've tried to be as open as possible. We've tried to involve as many people as possible in the creation of this. And thank you for everyone who's taken part in it, because it's really been appreciated. And so I wanted to finish really with some thanks. So I wanted to thank my team, the Climate Change and Sustainability team, for all the work that they've done on it. It's been a long time in the making, and there's been an awful lot of work that's gone in. So I want to thank everybody in my team for that, and also to all the officers in the council who've contributed. There's been an awful lot of input from lots of different people. Lots of people who are in the room here have inputted on this and really helped shape it. So thank you very much to them. Also to the partners and stakeholders, again, some of those who are in the room here, who have fed into the strategy and really shaped it. We've tried to be as inclusive as possible, and it was really appreciated that you took the time to feed into this. And also to the councillors as well, who asked questions about the strategy and also then shared their opinions and then ultimately supported the strategy. But finally, I want to really thank the community reporters, many of whom are in the room here with us tonight, and really say thank you for your fantastic work. It's been incredibly brilliant to see how you went off and really grasped this and went off and talked to your communities, talked to your networks, and brought that information back to us, and especially to me, because I use that to shape this strategy. And so I really, really do appreciate all the work that you put in. Thank you very much. And just to finish off, really, is we're going to be delivering these actions that are in the accompanying action plan, and we're going to be tracking our progress as well. We reported previously every single year, and we're going to carry on doing that so that it's out in the public domain, so that people can see what we've been doing and can hold us to account on how we're doing. We're going to be working with our partners and communities to take climate action, and you can all get involved. So you can get involved through individual actions that you can take to reduce your carbon emissions. You can ask those who've got influence to make changes. You can take part in community climate action, for example, our community climate microgrants, and also talking about climate change. And that is a really important thing. It may seem like a very small action, but it's a very powerful action, because it's about normalising climate change as a topic of conversation and normalising action on climate change. So I want to thank you all very much for coming on tonight. I want to thank you all for showing enthusiasm and support for this. Thank you for coming to the launch of this Richmond Climate and Nature Strategy. Thank you very much. And now we've got a panel discussion. So if I'd like to welcome to the stage John Evans, who's going to chair that, and then could the other panel members please come up to the stage, and we'll get started in just a moment. And while we're doing that, there's one announcement we forgot to say, which is that if there is a fire alarm, it's not a drill, and we need to go to the little green and congregate there, just in case, because we forgot to do that bit of admin at the start. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. Apologies, I'm very croaky. I think Richmond's biodiversity and the pollen count has really hit me the last couple of days, so just bear with me if my voice starts to crack a little bit. So we've really been suffering with the hay fever. Welcome everybody to this panel session, and thank you very much to our speakers earlier. And I think absolutely fantastic passion there and sort of food for thought for us all. So those of you who don't know me, I'm John Evans. I'm Assistant Chief Executive of Richmond Council, and I've had the privilege to lead the Council's climate and sustainability work, but really my role is only made possible by the fantastic team of staff led by Andrew, our fantastic lead councillor and councillor team as well at Richmond. And of course, everyone here this evening, because we all play a role in tackling the climate emergency and promoting biodiversity in Richmond. So we've got a brilliant panel lineup here today. It's probably the biggest panel I've ever seen on one of these sessions, so bear with us. We're here for the next sort of 50 minutes or so, I think, just seeing Andrew's nodding away. And we've structured the discussion around the core themes of the climate and nature strategy, which Andrew mentioned earlier, and so did Julia as well. In a minute, I will invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves. When they've done this, I've got some questions to get us thinking, but I'll make sure there's some time for you in the floor to ask a few questions too, and we've got a roving mic as well that we can bring around. So off we go. If I can ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and include a personal reflection on hopes and aspirations of your theme. So perhaps, Tim, if I let you go first.
Thank you very much. My name is Tim Lennon. I'm a local resident and I have 2 teenage children, neither of whom decided to come this evening, sadly. I've lived in the borough for over 15 years now. And I am the local coordinator for London Cycling Campaign. And my interest here really is very much about the confluence of active travel in all its forms and the climate change. Obviously, having children has really focused my mind both on their independence as how they get around, how they do things in their own time, and make their own decisions, but also about the world that we're leaving them. So I'm very interested in especially how they get around, how they access travel, how they access the facilities in the borough, and of course around London more widely. But also for myself, I want to do my best to set an example to them about what I do in the borough, how I get around, how I deal with others who, for example, who I know one of the questions I very often have to field is the question of not everybody can cycle, and I think that's always a very, very big issue for me because I'm aware of friends and neighbours who have transport questions like that, and that's a big area of interest for me. But I shall stop and pass on.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Myszka Gużkowska. I'm Vice Chair of Barnes Common. We look after about 140 acres of common land in Barnes. As a background, I'm an environmental scientist with expertise in urban surface water runoff, climate change, and trees and land management. I'm heavily involved in volunteering in the community, all aspects of it. My hope tonight is that we can focus on how the community will understand more about the causes of flooding and what we can do to prepare for it when it comes, because with climate change there will be flooding at some point. And we need, as a community, to have thought through how we manage our waters, how we reduce the impermeable surfaces across the borough, how we get more green and more blue.
Hello, my name is Marguerite Murdoch. I'm a local resident and a local architect, and I've become increasingly concerned about how difficult residents find it to future-proof their homes and to decarbonise their homes, and how many unnecessary stumbling blocks are being put in front of residents for many reasons or in many varieties. So that's why I've got involved with this.
Hi everyone, you know me. I feel a little like an imposter as the nature representative because I'm surrounded by people at Kew who know so much more than I do about nature. But my personal hopes and reflections include, in simplistic terms, more canopy cover and particularly shade over cycle boxes, because when it's this hot, you really appreciate a nice tree shading your cycle box. But more generally, resilience in nature, in the habitats and ecosystems that we can share this borough with and support within Richmond. And that sense of shared positivity, of living with, alongside and supporting our native and resilient species in the borough.
Good evening. I'm Simon Westgarth from Richmond Furniture Scheme, and I think I can see a few donors and supporters and customers in the audience this evening, so apologies if I'm going over old ground here. What we do at Richmond Furniture Scheme is we're a furniture reuse charity, so we're all about the circular economy. And what we're trying to do is to prevent as much furniture from going into landfill, but also making that available to the public and also people who need it. And there's an awful lot of good that can come out of reuse and recycling of furniture. And just to quote a couple of stats at you, last year we picked up nearly 140 tons of furniture through the scheme. We've supported nearly 900 people in need and around about 1,800 households around the borough. We've expanded that. And we're also working with over 100 volunteers who help in every way, shape, and form you can possibly imagine to make our operation what it is today. And I think one of the hopes and aspirations that we have is to educate. Make sure that everyone is aware of the benefits of what you can do, how much we can save in terms of landfill. It's estimated it's about, nationally, about 22 million pieces of furniture go into landfill every year. And so far, last year we did about 8,000. So we're a very small element of that. So I think as much as we can do to help promote and develop and nurture that spirit of sort of circular economy, that's one of our major hopes and aspirations.
Julia, we don't want to deprive you of oh, there's another one there, if by magic.
I thought you just maybe trying to cut down on the time overall there. So, Julia Needham-Watts, Councillor. I'm the Environment Lead at Richmond Council. Through that role, I also represent Richmond on various sub-regional bodies dealing with flood, surface water risks, the tidal risks, and also waste and things like that. And my hopes are very much that we continue to build our understanding, that we continue to build our partnerships so that we can keep on doing all those things that we need to do that we've just talked about in the climate and nature strategy.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your introduction. So I'm going to kick off with some questions, Chair's prerogative. And I'm going to start with Marguerite, if that's okay. If you just pass the microphone down to down, that's it. Pass the parcel. So in relation to buildings, what are the biggest opportunities of making Richmond's homes and buildings energy efficient? And what do we need to make this happen?
I think I'm going to turn the question a bit and take it away from the conversation about insulating and reducing bills and so on towards decarbonising. Hopefully that slots in well with what you discussed. So if I can answer that question with a question to everybody here. In this space, this is obviously a deep green space. Who here has a gas boiler? Okay, so we are, all of us, we are 77,000 residents in this borough that needs to decarbonise, get rid of our gas boilers in the next 18 years. So absorb that. So we, last year in this borough, we replaced 3,800 gas boilers and only 72 heat pumps. So we have a problem. And we've done that with a 7,500 government grant available to all of us and no grant to gas boilers. So we have to ask ourselves what's going on there. So can I expand a bit more, Mr. Stoll? So I think, and back to what Kew are doing, when we burn our gas boilers, we are burning methane. We call it very nicely a natural gas, but it's methane. And when methane burns, we are putting CO2 in the atmosphere. So for every year, each of us here are putting in 3 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's about the size of a double-decker bus. So if we electrify our heating and water systems, we will reduce that to 1 ton. And in 2030, this electric grid will be totally green. So if we get on with it, all of us here are doing quite a jolly good job in the next 5 years, if we can do that. So the difficult thing is, how are we going to switch to electric? And the only really, well, there's a lot of stuff out there, but the really clever thing is a heat pump. So if I can just very quickly say, a heat pump can do the heating for your hot water, it can do the heating for your house, and you can cool your house with a heat pump. And for every kilowatt you put into your house through a heat pump, you get 3 to 4 kilowatt, where you reduce 10% when you burn gas. So it's a no-brainer. You've got £7,500 bus grant, and you've now got a tax incentive that you don't pay VAT on this equipment and the labour going in. So I'm probably just saying to people, please go and look at the MCS website, get yourself a MCS improved installer, and from there you'll see there are not enough people around, but it's growing. And then there is where you can start tomorrow morning. Go to the MCS website.
So there's a challenge laid down to you all. So you often hear about Marguerite, the sort of tension between heritage and sustainability, and how do you balance that? What's your views on that?
So I think the first practical thing is we in this borough mostly have old buildings, so we need to accept that. But we are installing heat pumps more efficiently and running them at a higher temperature. So put that to the side. It's become a bit of a red herring. The industry has learned. We have got a problem with conservation areas. We have spoken, there's so much more information that needs to be out there. But Historic England, go to their website tomorrow morning. They've also put a guide out there now on heat pumps. The CCC, which mostly people here know what the CCC is, have also now got rid of the 1 meter rule. So you can do that. So you can put a heat pump in a conservation area under PD. And I think we could probably do with a lot more guidance from planning and so on. And that is happening. But there are ways around it. And everybody is moving in the right direction. Okay. Excellent.
Thank you. It's a really helpful challenge. So can I move us on then to Tim? And if you could just tell us what you think are the most impactful changes Richmond could make to support low or zero emission travel.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Really, as you probably won't be surprised to hear, my view is that by far the most impactful thing in terms of transport that any of us can do is to choose to complete a journey, any journey, by a mode other than driving. Unfortunately, driving, particularly an internal combustion engine car, is easily going to be your worst choice for air quality and for congestion. But interestingly, also your worst choice for your personal health. So I tend to think that I, in some ways, have quite an easy job here, because I think asking people to try and make positive, active travel choices, to choose to walk, to cycle, or also the expression wheeling as well, is a really good value option for everybody. The council wins because they're going to spend less maintaining the roads. We win because someone taking a journey by bike, by walking, by the bus, is reducing congestion, and by powering it yourself, you're significantly reducing your carbon footprint. And I think one of the things I want to address there was also that it doesn't have to be the whole journey. It could be, for example, you're going into London. You could ride a bike down to the station, and there's a new cycle hub going up at Richmond Station at the moment, as I'm sure some of you know. But the other thing is to think about, and I know a current favourite topic is the world of the Lime bike, but higher electric bikes, or electric bikes generally, are still a really good option. If you choose to make a journey by an electric bike, you're still bringing all of those benefits, and you're still getting the health benefits. I know there's a lot of criticism that if you choose to ride an electric bike, then you're not really getting the benefit, you're not getting the value, but actually electric bikes are a really big win. And so the thing I wanted to add to that is, one of the things that we really do need more of in the borough is more space for cycling. We need to be able to we need to be able to say to everybody, it's safe and pleasant and comfortable for you to walk out of your front door with a bike and to go to your destination, and for you not to have to think too hard about making that journey. And this is one of the things actually I personally reflect on regularly, because unfortunately, regularly my children are coming home after cycling to and from school complaining about being closed past. And I know that I don't think the people doing this are doing it on purpose. They're just not thinking about other people on the road at that time, unfortunately. But the thing I also wanted to address here and stress here, because we're seeing some of these things in the strategy, is there's lots of things that are already happening and have already improved prospects for active travel in the borough. So with 20 miles an hour, with the increasing number of school streets, with the number of streets now, the council is starting to improve where one-way streets are being made two-way for cycling. Even we have some areas of what you might controversially know as low-traffic neighbourhoods, where we've restricted traffic in particular areas to make sure those neighbourhoods are quieter and calmer, both for the residents and for people to get around by non-car modes. And I think this is what I really want to stress here, that actually everybody here can make one of these choices every day. As I say, it doesn't have to be a whole journey. It can be any part of your journey, and by making that choice, you're making an immediate, direct difference to your area, to your health, and to the air quality and to the climate impact of the borough.
Excellent, thank you, Tim. I know there are some questions around, but I'll come to the floor after we've asked each of the panel some questions. So, and I got a Lime bike here today and parked it responsibly, I might add. So I'm feeling very happy on that. So can I ask next? Can I ask Myszka about resilience? So how can Richmond prepare for climate impacts like flooding and heat waves?
Okay. I think it's really important for us to understand why we here in this location are more vulnerable to flooding than maybe people in other locations. We've got climate change, which is going to increase the frequency and intensity of rainstorms. So we get them more often, and they're going to be much denser than they've been before. And if you think we're at the bottom of a river catchment, we're also getting all the storm water that goes into the streams upstream, coming downstream. Then we're also in an area which is near the sea, so there is sea level change, and there is also tidal lock. So when we get 2 tides a day, if that coincides with a huge rainstorm, that backs up through the sewer system and it causes flooding. And it also causes flash flooding. So instead of, if we were in a rural area, of the water seeping through the soil and getting into the rivers, let's say in a few weeks' time, actually in an urban area, because we're so highly paved, it can reach the water bodies in 20 minutes. And with that, it brings all the dirt off the road and a pile of pollution. So it kills quite a lot as soon as it goes into the water body. So the key thing for us is to try to slow down the speed with which the water during a storm gets into the river. And what we have been very lucky with Barnes Common is that we've had some funding from the Environment Agency to start looking at the process of how we work with the community in order to reduce the flooding and in order to increase our resilience for when flooding arrives. And it's a partnership between the council, wetlands and Barnes Common. And so what we've been doing is, first of all, trying to raise awareness across the community by involving the community in a heap of projects that will help us slow down the speed with which the water enters the rivers. And part of that is a schools programme. We've actually got an education programme that's going into 15 state schools this year. And we've also got a programme that reaches volunteers through the Duke of Edinburgh's, coming in young 14 to 20-year-olds, coming in to work with us on a variety of projects, raising awareness that way. We have some very specific projects, and there's a poster right at the back there with a picture of the river, and some of the projects are listed on that. So we have reed beds, and we use volunteers to come in to help us dig out the reed beds, because those hold water. They hold water when there's a storm, slows it down from going to the river. They have the added benefit of cleaning the water as well. They actually take the heavy metals out of the water. We have got several places where we're re-wiggling Beverley Brook, which is one of the tributaries that goes into the Thames through our area. And that means basically re-meandering the rivers which were previously canalised in the Victorian era, which worked great for that time, but which are not quite right for now. We need to go back to nature-based solutions to look at how we re-meander the river. It also slows down the speed with which the water goes into the river. We've got building or constructing ponds around the place. Great fun for volunteers, actually, to create a pond. They can be small, they can be big. They slow down the water. And if everyone had a little pond in their garden, every little bit helps. We have a community fund as well, which has been providing small amounts of money for members of the public to do things on their own properties. For example, depaving their front gardens, implementing soakaways, thinking carefully about water butts, because in summer you can get really bad rainstorms as well, and the ground is completely hard. So how you manage the water is very, very important. Rain gardens, you'll see down in some streets what look like little gardens along the edges of the pavements. Those are rain gardens. Again, it's more pleasant, attractive, green, permeable surface to hold the water. And we've actually also got a street in Barnes now, Kitson Road, which has got, it's an experiment really, on how to deal with urban water runoff. It has a product called HydroRock underneath the surface, and that absorbs water when there is a storm and holds it until it's needed. So the key thing about this is that every single person can do this in their house, in their garden, in their street. And if we can get street action, even better. If you want to have rain gardens along the side of your street, that is something that can be planned. And we need also to ensure that the community is involved not just in the planning, not just for their individual benefit, but for the whole community. And volunteers are absolutely essential for that, and we've had some wonderful volunteers of all ages helping us.
Excellent, thank you very much. If we pass it up to Rachel is next. So Rachel, we've heard of some of the fantastic stuff that is going on at Kew from your brilliant presentation earlier. So just taking us back really, so why is protecting nature so integral to our overall approach to our climate and sustainability goals?
Thank you. So we all know intuitively and scientifically that biodiversity underpins all life on Earth. Nature is essential, and sometimes it feels odd to frame it all about us, but nature provides our food, our fuel, our shelter, our clean air, medicines, carbon sequestration, water filtration, oxygen production. We know we're living in an age of extinction with accelerated rates of biodiversity loss. 2 in 5 plants face extinction. 45% of all flowering plants are believed to be at risk. There are more than 2 million species of fungi, we believe, not even discovered yet. We're losing species before they can be discovered to science, before their properties, their benefits, their role in the ecosystem can be understood. And without healthy ecosystems, locally and globally, the planet loses one of its most effective and affordable tools for climate mitigation. So there are absolutely win-win opportunities to protect, preserve, enhance, restore nature, build resilience locally, and nature connectivity and corridors within the borough are an absolutely crucial aspect of that resilience, because as habitats become isolated and segregated, that massively increases their vulnerability to the flooding, changing weather patterns, changing climates that we're already seeing. We also know from the recent pandemic that the risk of habitat loss increases the chance of future zoonotic diseases. And we also learned during lockdown quite how much we all really value time in nature. And so it's not just about what nature does for us, i.e. keeping us alive, but it also offers huge well-being benefits. And so that weaving of those natural habitats and ecosystems into our daily lives is a really important feature of future well-being and happiness.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was a really big question, very ably answered there, so thank you. So Simon, if you could just pass the microphone across to your left. Resources. So what does a circular economy look like at a community level, and how can this be scaled up?
We've probably all got our own thoughts on what a circular economy actually looks like. There's various ways in which we can look at this thing. But let me just give you one example. You all saw the picture of bins earlier. So what happened to the old ones? We got them. And we've managed to rehome them with a community centre and a couple of other locations. And I'm hoping that Habitats and Heritage are going to take some more off our hands when they go to a new site. So that's one example. There was also leftover timber and materials that we've been able to reuse and repurpose, making things like planters that have appeared at the Hampton Court Flower Show. So that's a little bit about recycling, I suppose. The key thing is everybody has to be engaged in it, and I think everyone needs to make a conscious decision about how we consume and the ways in which we consume and whether we need to consume. And what do we do with old stuff? And there's lots and lots of different ways of doing this. It's not just the Richmond Furniture Scheme. Obviously, we want to try and help as much as we can. But there are online tools such as Freegal and communities that can help with exchanging and providing a circular economy solution. And then you've got great initiatives like, we call them men's sheds, but sort of people sheds where people can stuff can get repaired and reused, and repair cafes, which are a really great initiative, and the people who do it are passionate about what they do and making that happen. So I think those are some examples at a community level about what circular economy can look like. And how do you scale that? Well, you try and do more, but the challenges around that are actually furniture reuse, for example, is not cheap to do. Our bill is going to be roughly 400,000 this next financial year, which is a lot of money. And the reason for that is it's not just about getting the furniture in and cleaning it up. We do need to pay some staff. We do need to switch the lights on, hopefully in a green way. We do need to make sure that we can run a van. We've got the costs of the van to cover, and so on and so forth. So all of that mounts up, and it's an expensive operation. And when you also include in that things like reused appliances. So we've got a wonderful scheme in Wandsworth that refurbishes perfectly good appliances that can be reused in the home. Somebody has to pay for that process. We buy those products in, we supply them with a warranty, but all of that has to be paid for somehow. So there are some costs associated with circular economy, but huge saving on carbon footprint, huge saving on resources and materials. You're not sending a new appliance halfway around the planet to get to someone's home. It's going to come from within a few miles. A couple of years ago, thanks to some funding, we were able to invest in an electric deliveries and collections vehicle. You may have seen photographs of it. And there's a leaflet on the table over there with an example of it. So those are ways in which we can try and make this work. But one sort of last piece, which is what are the pressures, what are the barriers, if you will. One of them is actually just space. It's very difficult to manage furniture. For an example, it's a never-ending game of Tetris, if anybody's ever played that game. We have to move things around, we have to juggle it around a lot. So space and that as a resource is a very important factor from our point of view. And actually, if you're going to have repair cafes and so on and so forth, you need venues, you need willing partners to do those sorts of things. And one last example I'll just mention before I pass the baton. We also are trying to develop partnerships. So we're working with the council on the BlueScapes program. We're trying to reuse as much of that, those materials that come onto that as we can. We're working with Richmond Housing Partnership as well in partnership with that. We've got a local bicycle repair charity that takes leftover bicycles, adult bikes, sends them off to prisons to be refurbished, and then they go back into the community. There's lots and lots of different ways. We all have a part to play in that, and if everybody engages with that, I think we've got a chance of being able to grow and develop the circular economy.
Excellent, thank you, Simon. Councillor Needham-Watts, it's very rare that I get to put my lead member on the spot with a question, but so I'm quite looking forward to this. Julia, what is the role of the council in delivering net zero and responding to the effects of climate change?
Okay, another light question there. Well, firstly, I'd say the council is a land owner and a land manager, so planting those trees in our parks and on our streets is really important for their carbon storage effects, as well as the biodiversity and the coolness that they bring to against the urban heat effect. So that's one thing. I think it's important to acknowledge that the council itself can't resolve all the challenges, but the council can identify and communicate some of those, the risks and the opportunities, and act as a facilitator for businesses, community organisations, and so on. And working in partnership, I think, is really important, and it's great to have so many of our partners here today. One of the highlights of my fortnight, Saturday morning, down at the Mega Skip with Simon and his colleagues and the council officers, meeting residents, bringing old junk out of their houses, relieving them of their burden, and knowing that some of that is going to be whipped into shape, bicycles, old wardrobes, chairs, kitchen goods, things like that. We can give them a new purpose. And it makes people happy to know that those dots are being joined up. So I think we often concentrate on the burden and the challenge and the difficulty of it. But there is joy to be had, simply put, in doing the right things sometimes. So that's my upbeat message. Another thing the council can do is lobbying London, lobbying central government for the funding decisions and the backing and the support that we need to make progress in some of the areas that we've talked about on planning and heat pumps and around that. And just working multi-borough, multi-organisational efforts, such as with Community BlueScapes, you know, again, wherever we're putting in resilience, we're also putting in carbon storage, and that's all going to contribute to our net zero targets. And I think there's so much to go into, and I'm sort of skating over the surface a little bit, but I think convening networking opportunities like this one is also important. And one thing that we've heard loud and clear from the first Sustainability Forum we had, and again this evening, is the importance of providing really clear, detailed information for people who want to do the right thing but are confused or overwhelmed by it. You know, at the entry level, if you like, that's our Residents' Action Pack, richmond.gov.uk. Go and have a look at it. It's entertaining, colourful, easy read, and simple things that people can do. But this year also we want to step that up and get that retrofit guidance out there for homeowners, for landlords, for businesses, so people have a clearer idea on what to do next and sort of take out some of those barriers and perceived barriers to action. I mean, I could go on and on, but I sense, you know, we need to hear from audience members, so I'll pause there. That's some of what the council is doing.
That is a very good segue into hopefully opening it up to the floor for any questions. We've got a roving mic at the front, which I think we're going to. There's one there, I think, in the front. That's it. Yeah. Hiya.
I'd like to ask the last two speakers about something that happened 15 years ago. The council hired a church hall for the weekend in Twickenham, and we were all encouraged to bring in furniture that we no longer wanted, or tools, or garden equipment, and it seemed to be a roaring success. And I've always been a bit surprised that it was never repeated.
That's a good challenge.
It is a good challenge. Let's do that again. You know, the old jumble sale. It was great. I remember those. You know, it's again finding somebody else is chucking something out, but to somebody else, it's a really important, valuable piece of equipment. Or for me, it's finding a vintage piece of clothing that someone's very kindly put into one of the local charity shops. And if you're a dab hand with a sewing machine, even better. But it's also about those skills that people need, and that maybe we're losing touch with, but perhaps that's another strand, is giving people the skills to spot a bargain, do it up, make it as good as new, and Simon's a dab hand at all that, so I'll pass the mic to him.
No, I'm not. It's my volunteers who are dab hands at that. But anyway, great idea. Yeah, let's do it. Sounds like a cracker.
Excellent. The lady there, yes, you. If you can give your name and if you're from an organisation, that'd be helpful as well.
I'm not from an organisation. I'm a resident. My name is Philippa, and I have a question about heat pumps and gas. I've recently moved to Petersham from Shepherd's Bush, so big change, and had my gas disconnected for free by Octopus, which was amazing. They just came and they did it. They don't seem to advertise that they do it, but it's a great scheme. So my question, because actually heat pumps just feel sort of so clunky, and I was thinking of putting in an electric boiler, and the reason I'm asking is kind of what's the greener option really? What's the better option, a clunky heat pump or an electric boiler with electric radiators? That was it really, and I hope it's relevant to others.
So it's a really good question. I think it's one we sort of all grapple with. So I think, Marguerite, that's in your wheelhouse, definitely.
are you in a detached house, semi-detached, terrace, and you've got a garden? So I think it's like heat pumps and the way a heat pump. Michael de Battista was here a minute ago. I don't know, is he left? Yeah. The science behind it, I think it's really worthwhile following Michael's protons for breakfast. That's quite good because I think you've got to be informed. And I think there's a very good podcast about heat pumps also. Understand the science. Once you've done that, you'll see it's a no-brainer, a heat pump, because it is so efficient. And if you've got a garden, you can put your heat pump on the boundary now. Have you got a mega flow tank for your hot water? So you've got a combi. So that is so I'm actually in the process of removing my gas boiler, and that is probably my biggest issue. Is I've got to move my vacuum cleaner and my recycling bins and find a place for that and so on. So I think, and actually in the bigger scheme of the planet, that's probably minor, my little problem about my vacuum cleaner. But I think that is the type of thinking you'll have to do, is you've got to put a water storage tank there, and you've got to put a smaller tank above it and so on inside, but the heat pump will be outside. You have to have a water tank. You do, because the electricity works, the electric boiler works like your kettle. So you are heating water to move around your house for your hot water for your shower and for your water in your radiator system. So it's resistance that you are using to heat that water. So, but an electric boiler is not efficient. So you would be wise to rather install a heat pump.
Excellent, thank you very much. Lots of hands. Can I pass this gentleman at the front here? Sorry to make you run with the mic.
This is also about heat pumps, but I'm in a slightly different situation. Last year, I decided to update. I have a large detached house built in 1934. And I had, which you can do if you go to a company, you can have an investigation. They will actually come and check your house. It costs you about £300 or £400, but it's worth doing. And in my case, the insulation of this old house was terrible. And so they did suggest that it was just about worth going to air source heat pump, because air source heat pump is very much better if you're well insulated. So the end of this is, in my view, that we should all be pressing to get much bigger grants for insulation of old properties, because there are a lot of old properties like mine in this borough, and a lot of people will not consider it because they say, well, it would cost me 30,000, 40,000 to insulate, because you need to insulate properly. It's quite different if you've got a newly built house, which was insulated to start with. So the issue of insulation is inseparably linked, in my view, with air source heat pumps if you have a large old house.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, so I think that your question there is probably one of the big red flags we get out there. And I think we should find a place on the council's website where we put these big red flag questions that people, this is my point about tripping over stuff. So to answer that one question, we are busy putting in heat pumps, oversizing them. So they're running at a slightly higher temperature. And because of that, people aren't feeling that lower heat so much. big problem is the spark gap, and that gas is subsidised in the UK and electricity isn't. That is busy changing. And I think Octopus is, again, a very good place to go to for information on all of that, because the way they work with that, the way they, so they go for a lower tariff. So when you run your heat pump, so say, for example, you heat your hot water, they will, it's done on a lower tariff rate and stuff like that. So the industry learns slowly, but it has learned, and they go to a proper MCS installer, and it's on the website, and get your grant for that, and go to people like Octopus, get your lower energy off, lower cost energy off the grid and so on, and then it all adds up.
Excellent.
Well, I'm actually working on a project at the moment where
I'm just a bit conscious of time, just want to sort of get a couple more questions in. Is there a question that's not about heat pumps? Just so we can get a variety of views. So we've got the lady there that you're standing next to.
Hi. Mine's a suggestion, actually. We talked earlier on about trees and the importance of large trees. And I don't know if you know, in your council, you're terribly good at letting people take their trees down and saying that you have to put another tree up in its place. But unfortunately, you don't follow it up. And I think that would be one really, really easy win, where if somebody's been sent a message saying they can take down their tree, but they have to put another one in its place, that somebody follows up. And unfortunately, the team don't have the resources to do that because I asked them.
Okay, that's something we can follow up, Julia, back at the council at some point. And there was a question there. The gentleman with his hand up.
Hello. Right, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. A two-part, if you don't mind. A quick one. I haven't read the big report, about 25-30. I've heard no mention about either heating or cooling networks being introduced by the council. I'm not aware of any. I'm sure there are some. And the second bit is, what are the views of the committee, if you like, or the presenters, with regard to encouraging reductions in energy demand? We hear about buildings consuming, I think, 64%. Why don't we try and educate people not to use energy? What's being done about that? Thanks.
Good question. I don't, Julia, you'd want to pick up the first point, maybe some of the bits about the council's reduction.
On sort of community heating and cooling, I'll accept that that's not an area that we've made great progress to date. It's certainly identified as one where we do need to, which is the importance of updating your strategy. It's to identify what you've done, what you've achieved, and what you need to do next. And that's why we have annual action plans and so on. It's not my area of expertise, but it is one where we need to fill that gap. So again, a good challenge. The other point was around
about reducing demand.
Use. It's really important, and I think the point made about insulation is, well, that's a demonstration of energy reduction, and it can be quite simple to do. You heard earlier about our warm home packs and what we've done with lower income households, to just very simple things, draft excluder and so on, can make a little bit of a difference. And each household that's better insulated is likely to be using less energy. There are other things that you can do with your electricity supply and using your appliances at different times and being on the right tariff. And tariff, have I pronounced that correctly? Yeah, sounded wrong when I said it. So there's many things we can do, and I think that's part of that, the clarity of information and sharing that information and making sure it's accessible for people.
Does anybody else have any views on that wanted to share?
Well, just more of an indirect energy consumption piece is if you reuse items, you're likely to have an impact on the energy that would have been consumed making new stuff. So that's an indirect benefit.
Just to speak from a Kew perspective on heat networks, when I joined Kew, I thought that part of our solution at Kew was going to be a heat and cooling network between our buildings. But it turns out that our heat users are a bit too far apart. And and I might be wrong, but my general understanding is that the density in Richmond isn't really quite high enough. I'm sure there are cases where heat networks absolutely could work, but the more central boroughs are where there are massive opportunities, and reusing heat from the tube. There's lots of work going on more centrally, but that wasn't part of the solution, at least in my Kew part of the borough. And then just briefly on reducing demand, that switch, as you've said, from gas to heat pumps, that does reduce demand. So for every heat pump you install, you use half or a bit more than half of the energy in terms of kilowatts because of that inherent efficiency of a heat pump. Ours are half because of we're installing high temperature heat pumps. So it links just very briefly to that insulation point. So if for whatever reason you can't insulate, if for whatever reason your building needs hot water to stay at high temperatures, you can't reduce that flow temperature, you absolutely can and should install a high temperature heat pump. A low temperature heat pump is more efficient and it will be cheaper to run, but a high temperature heat pump can give you 80-degree water that's decarbonized, low carbon, hot water. And if it's impossible or not affordable to insulate, then the high temperature heat pump will solve that problem for you.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time, Andrew. We got time for one more? We've got time for one more. So as the lady behind you, Andrew, had her hand up immediately, so I will... Sorry, can you just start that again?
We've been skating over the issue of how do we finance this. So I live in a block of flats, which are privately owned. And I think there are lots of blocks of flats in Richmond. And if you live in a block of flats, it's very difficult to retrofit without finance. Because, for example, if we could have heat pumps, then we would have to pay for the heat or whatever to go up to each of the flats. And it's also very difficult to get advice because, as we've found today, all the attention is on separate houses or terraced houses, but not on blocks of flats, which have very different problems. And I wondered what plans the council is going to make or could make to provide A, advice, and B, possibly financing loans to properties like mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Julia, did you want to...
Well, I'll have a go. I think it's really important, and it's not that we're ignoring the fact that blocks of flats also want to be brought up to date and made energy efficient. I think we'd acknowledge that it's probably more straightforward to appeal to individual homeowners who may, or if they are able to do up their house, then we can invite them to think about doing retrofit as part of a refurbishment. Again, I think that's one of the areas we've identified as where action needs to be stepped up, and to go out into our communities, talk to people, work out what their barriers are, and begin to put together that advice. We certainly have that ambition. That would be both on what we call low-rise, Art Deco street, or blocks of flats with, some of our blocks of flats have oil heating still, and a whole variety of different sizes of apartments and different types of ownership. So it's complicated, but it's something that we are determined to work on, and you'll be hearing more about. And just on the financing, I think that's absolutely a key point as well. Again, I would admit to this not being my area of expertise. I'm much happier talking about rivers and trees, but I have colleagues in the council for whom this is a joy to be thinking of, and looking at financing, whether that's private financing or grant funding from government, how we get intelligent models of green financing into this borough, because we know that we've got people who want to take action, and we think that we've got a good case to make to get that financing in. We just need to work out how to do it.
Oh, good.
I think flats is a massive problem. I agree with you. But what is interesting is to see how many of these flats, I don't know how old your flat, a lot of them were not built with individual heating systems. So actually a lot of them have got communal heating that was, because I think one of the big things is nobody's talking to one another. And I think as a group of residents in a block of flats, there has to sort of start being a culture has to now start being developed where a group of people in a flat in a block of flat come together and say, we can't do this individual heating anymore. And how can we as a group then go to the council and say, help us here? I think it has to start, there has to start this real culture change, that people work together in a block of flat. Because I think if you look at boilers, fundamentally, they've actually made everybody exist in their little isolated way. And actually, maybe this is a better, if people start thinking of this as a communal solution rather than an individual solution. I think that.
Thank you very much. I think I'll draw us to a close if that's okay. We've certainly heard an awful lot of information. There's areas I think we probably, I'm pointing at our Andrew there, will take away as a council particularly, and think about the level of information, type of information we've got on our website where we can provide, and clearly heat pumps are the definitely the topic of the day here. So I wanted to thank our panelists as well. I mean, when do you ever get to hear about, 140 tons of furniture, 77,000 gas boilers and 2 million species of fungi in one panel session? So I think that gives an idea of the sort of diversity of sort of views and how this really does, is a multiplicity of areas all combine into delivering a better, more sustainable Richmond. So can we thank our panel in the usual way? And thank you very much from me. So I think I'm drawing to a close, Andrew. That's right. So thank you very much all for coming today. There's still the marketplace over there. I think we've still got the room for 20 or so minutes. So if you want to catch anybody or ask any questions or network, please feel free to do that. I just want to thank Andrew and the team. I think they've done a fantastic job in putting this together today. I hope you found it useful. And I think it just shows that we can tackle this when we're all working together, and it does require, we as a council can only do so much. It requires all of us to work together, and thank you very much for coming and showing your commitment today. So thank you.